Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. I am here today to do a book review, and I will be talking about The Devil of Nanking by Mo Hayder. So I've been sort of struggling over the last couple of weeks as to whether or not I should even attempt to do a review of this book for several reasons. But one of the main ones is because this book is really hard to give a description, at least one that doesn't give vital things away about the story. And I think one of the best aspects of reading this book is to sort of go into it with not really knowing very much about it, because it ends up having more of an impact on the reader, in my opinion. So I will do my best to give a very brief synopsis of what the story is about without giving too much away. So The Devil of Nanking basically has two sort of interwoven storylines going on. You've got one that takes place in the present and one that takes place in the past. The present narrative is told from the viewpoint of this woman named Gray, who, from the very beginning, we know has a lot of problems. She has a lot of psychological problems. And in fact, we never find out what her actual real name is. She goes by the name of Gray, but that was actually a nickname that was given to her when she was in a mental institution. And Gray is obsessed with finding this footage that was supposedly filmed during the massacre of Nanking, China in 1937. This absolutely terrible act that supposedly happened, that she once read about, that was mentioned very briefly in a book that she read about. But anytime that she had gone after that to try and find proof of this actually happening, it was never in any other books. Anybody that she ever talked to said that it never happened. So her parents basically told her she was crazy and that she was making this all up. So she becomes obsessed with finding this footage that supposedly exists. And the person that has this footage, that she thinks has this footage, is a professor, a visiting professor who is in Japan named Shisho Ming. And so Gray goes from her home in England all the way to Japan to try and convince this man to show her this footage to prove that she's not crazy. Now, the other narrative in the book is told from the viewpoint of Shisho Ming, who was actually in Nanking at the time of the massacre in 1937, and we are exposed to his story through his journal entries. And so you have Gray's story and you have Shisho Ming's story, and they go back and forth, and it is fascinating, to put it mildly, to sort of read both viewpoints of both main characters. And I absolutely loved it. I know a lot of people don't like dual POVs in books, but it's one of my favorite things if it's done well. So when Gray finally tracks down Shisho Ming, at first he wants nothing to do with her, but then after being sort of stalked by this woman for a while, Shisho Ming agrees that he will help her, but Gray has to go on this quest for him first and has to accomplish this task in order to get him to help her. And that's pretty much all I can tell you about the storyline without giving away the little nooks and crannies that make this book so incredible. So as I said, I've kind of been struggling as to whether or not I should do a review of this book. And another reason why is because I have had a really hard time sort of processing my feelings for this book. As I said, I read it about 2 weeks ago, and since then, I have not really been able to read anything else, because the story has stayed with me, the characters have stayed with me, and days later, I still find myself thinking about the story and thinking about these characters, and it's to the point where I can't focus on another story because I'm still living in this world. And that's really never happened to me before to this extent. This is going to sound really cliched and silly, reading this book was a life-changing experience for me, and it's something that's going to stay with me for the rest of my life, the story and the characters, because it just affected me on such a deep, deep level. One of the many, many, many things that I loved about this book is Mo Hayder's writing style. The way she writes is just so beautiful, and it has a dreamlike quality. It's like you're in the middle of this book, but it feels like it's sort of, everything is sort of tilted a little bit, like the axis has been turned, so everybody sort of, as a reader, you feel very off-kilter, you feel very unsettled from the very beginning of this book, and that only increases as you go through the story. That never goes away, not even for a second. Even in sort of like the little sort of mundane things that goes on in certain sections of the book, you still have this feeling of dread. You know something is going to happen, you know something big is going to happen, and you also have the idea that it's not going to be a good thing. There's not a single paragraph, page, word of dialogue or description that is not perfectly well done, in my opinion. And everything about what she experiences in Japan feels real and just like you're there experiencing it with her. I loved everything about all the sort of peripheral characters that pop up. She gets a job as a hostess in this club, which was actually something that Mo Hayder did when she was younger, so she kind of had that experience to write about, so it feels very real. And then, which I've actually told my friend that I feel like the third main character of this book is the house that Gray lives in, because it's sort of this very sort of spooky, almost haunted. It is haunted in several ways. And it's like this looming character unto itself, this house. And it feels like it's just ready to collapse and dissolve around them. And there's whole sections of the house that can't be accessed, that have been blocked off. So you kind of feel like everything is very precarious and just sort of waiting to dissolve, waiting to collapse. Now, as you can see by all of my little notes that I took, I ran out of Post-its while I was reading this book, which has never happened to me before. Getting back to what I was saying about how this book sort of makes you feel sort of off kilter while you're reading it, there are certain scenes towards the end of the book especially that are just, you feel a sense of just overwhelming dread while reading them, not only because you know things are just sort of spiraling out of control, but because you know something bad is coming. And you just keep waiting and waiting and waiting for what the bad thing is to happen. And the scenes that lead up to the climax of this book are just so incredibly well done, and I just would not have been able to stop reading it even if I tried. Thankfully, I read this book while I was on vacation, so I didn't have to stop reading the book because it was just so interesting and so compelling, and I felt such a connection to the characters, and I just loved every single moment that I spent reading this book, even though a lot of what I was reading was in fact very, very, very difficult to read. Especially the last third of this book. There are a lot of scenes that are very disturbing, and I would say that I could sit here and gush about this book for hours, and I absolutely love it, and I would recommend everyone to read it, with the caveat that there are certain parts of this book that are very disturbing and hard to deal with and hard to read. So if you are easily triggered by like violence and sort of not really gore, but just intense scenes, then you might want to skip this book. But if you just love a book and you love getting lost in a story and you love just being overwhelmed and having your life taken over by a book, then I can't recommend this book highly enough. It is fantastic. Everything about it works, in my opinion. The storyline, the world building, the characters, the connection that I felt with the characters, everything succeeds. And not only is this far and away my favorite book that I've read all year, it is quite possibly the best book that I've ever read, period. And I do not say that lightly, because my favorite books, my top 5 favorite books, hardly ever change. But I honestly think that because, for no other reason than the fact that I have not been able to stop thinking about this story, I have not been able to move past this story and these characters, that alone is reason enough to say that it's the most amazing book that I've ever read. And I have to say, I can't make a video without commenting on the cover, which on one hand is one of the most beautiful covers, but also one of the most disturbing covers I've ever seen. So, obviously I gave this 5 stars on Goodreads. It is in my 6-star read shelf on Goodreads as well, and it has been added to my all-time favorite list. And like I said, I honestly think that this is the best book that I have ever read in my life. So if any of you out there are interested in knowing more about the story, send me a comment, send me a message, and I would love to talk with some of you guys about this book. I noticed something after I read it. I kind of went on YouTube to see if there was other video reviews for this book, and there's only a handful of reviews, which kind of surprises me. It kind of makes me sad that more people haven't read this book because it's so phenomenal. And I think that was the tipping point for me to actually make a video, is if I could just convince one person to read this book, I would be a happy girl, because I need people to talk to about it. So that's pretty much it, you guys. Like I said, if you want to know more about the book, if you want to know more about Mo Hayder, if you've read this book, I would absolutely love to hear what any of you have to say about it. Your thoughts. Did you like it? Did you not like it? Did you think that they could have done more? Could they have done less? Give me your thoughts down in the comment section. And as always, I really appreciate you guys watching my channel. I know I don't make videos nearly as often as I should, but I'm trying my best to change that. So until next time, you guys, I really appreciate all of your support and love, and I will talk with you later. Have a good day and happy reading, guys.